of Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I'm Joe Matthew.
Unconditional surrender. That's what President Trump is demanding from Iran's regime as the conflict nears the one-week mark with no end in sight. The White House insists weapon stockpiles can, quote, go much further as defense contractors meet with the president today. We'll speak with retired General David Petraeus, former CIA Director, about the ongoing conflict and what could come next.
And WTI tops 90. U.S. oil surging over 12% to top $90 a barrel for the first time since October 2023, capping its biggest ever weekly gain. NEC Director Kevin Hassett telling Bloomberg today the administration has many tools to address rising prices, but ruling out for now tapping the Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
I reemphasize that there has not been a conversation to dip into that yet, because our expectation is that this effort in Iran is way ahead of schedule.
And labor market warning signs. U.S. payrolls unexpectedly fell by 92,000 in February, one of the sharpest declines since the pandemic, raising fresh questions about the strength of the labor market. Later this hour, Betsey Stevenson, former chief economist at the Department of Labor, joins us to unpack what the data means for the broader economy.
And we begin this evening at the White House, where President Trump held a key meeting today with some of the biggest names in the defense industry. At issue, munition supplies, and whether the White House has enough high-end, sophisticated weaponry to sustain a prolonged war with Iran. President Trump posting just after that meeting that they've agreed to, quote, quadruple production of exquisite class weaponry, and that the U.S. has virtually unlimited supply of medium and upper medium grade munitions. As he puts it, this all coming as President Trump says there will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender, something White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked about today.
What the president means is that when he, as commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, determines that Iran no longer poses a threat to the United States of America and the goals of Operation Epic Fury has been fully realized, then Iran will essentially be in a place of unconditional surrender. Whether they say it themselves or not, frankly, they don't have a lot of people to say that for them.
And we're joined now by Bloomberg's Mario Parker, as the White House has been facing growing questions over its weapons stockpiles, especially these high-end munitions. Mario, thank you for joining us here. Does this indicate that the administration is preparing for a longer haul in Iran?
I think there's a couple of issues here, Joe. One, the White House has been quite defensive over the past week or so of reports that General Kane and others were warning about weaponry being stretched. The fact is also that we've seen Iran just strike so many targets in the Middle East. We knew from day one when this erupted that this would look a lot different than Venezuela did, and it really is unfolding at a much slower pace right now.
We had Iran's president posting on X earlier today, before President Trump's comments about an unconditional surrender, saying that some countries had initiated efforts for mediation. What do we know about whether or not there has been any sort of diplomatic outreach leading up to today? Because President Trump has said that it's, quote, too late for those talks.
Yes, and he's also said that he would not accept anything less than an unconditional surrender. We don't know what that would look like, or it's hard to envision that right now. There were reports earlier this week, obviously, as well, that the CIA had some back channels with Iranian channels. Also, we know that there are some allies of the U.S. in the region that have been agitating for this to come to a rapid conclusion. Just earlier this week as well, German Chancellor Merz, for example, was saying that he wants this to rapidly conclude. We know Saudi Arabia and others who have been in the crosshairs would want to do that as well.
What are we looking for this weekend, Mario? Both the president, the defense secretary have both promised a much more intense wave in this conflict. They said in the coming days that would probably be about now. Where's the president going to be this weekend, and what are you watching?
The president is set to be down in Florida. He's got a Latin American event that he's set to host as well. There's the dignified transfer of the unfortunate lives of soldiers that have been lost in this conflict in the recent days as well, that we would expect for him to have as well. And again, just the Latin American summit.
All right, Bloomberg's Mario Parker. Thanks, Mario, thanks so much. And U.S. oil surged today, posting the biggest weekly gain on record. WTI crude broke $90 a barrel for the first time since October of 2023, as the war in Iran shows no signs of abating. Joining us now with analysis from Bloomberg's Miami bureau is Mike McGlone, senior commodity strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence. So, Mike, there seems to be a supply problem and a storage problem as the Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed. We got reporting today that Kuwait has begun cutting production. Just what are you pricing in right now for just how high we could see these barrels ultimately get?
A lot of it's going to depend on the weekend and when the Strait opens. Just the fact that it was closed the first time in history was the key thing I got wrong. I didn't think they would be able to succeed in closing, but why is it closed? Insurance companies are trying to stay for safety. So the bottom line now is, the thing that typically happens when we do this, it pumps up prices, and I'm hearing about massive amount of producer hedging. So if the Strait, if it cleans up pretty soon, and we go do what's normal, we just kind of alleviate some of the conflict, then those prices, this spike will do what it normally does. It'll accelerate a bear market down to lower levels because it's going to bring on more supply. The key thing to remember is the supply is basically coming from the Western Hemisphere and most notably U.S. now. The bottom line is U.S. is a net exporter near 4 million barrels a day. When crude oil peaked in 2008 at 145, we're talking about 90 now, the U.S. is a net importer near 12 million barrels a day. So that's the big difference. It's the fog of war, but the way I see this now is this is a typical peak like when crude oil peaked at $130 when Russia invaded Ukraine. Now we have another issue. It's where it's going to look like a week from now, and it's got to get worse, otherwise prices are going to more likely go lower. Remember, it's Friday. We have a long weekend.
Yeah. Really interesting, Mike. I know that you were pointing to the potential for $40 a barrel just a couple of weeks ago before this all emerged. Now you've got a black swan in a bear market. What's the trader to do? Short crude?
Well, some traders I hear hedgers are selling, and I will reiterate my theme, Joe. This is going to accelerate a potential trend towards that price towards the end of the year. So let's look at one example. Natural crude oil is up about 60% in a year. In January, natural gas was up 100% in the year. That's the front contract. Now it's down 15% on the year. I think that's the trajectory for crude oil. And the bottom line is, what's the main trajectory? What's the main thing that Mr. Trump wants for midterms? He's got pre-existing trends in his favor. Unless that Strait stays closed, it's going to just accelerate those supply surpluses. Unless they're cut, decrease demand, and increase that trend towards $40 a barrel, which is particularly what happens. So I stick with that outlook, and I accelerate it. Now I think it's going to happen towards the end of this year.
Are you sticking with 40? Mike McGlone, fascinating as always, our senior commodity strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence. We thank you, sir. Joining us now with the reaction to everything unfolding here in the Middle East and here in Washington, Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida, who serves on the House Appropriations Committee. Congresswoman, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. When lawmakers, including yourself, come back to Washington next week, there's going to be a big ask, it looks like, from the White House, a request for supplemental funding. After already seeing the first ever $1 trillion defense budget, will you vote yes?
Well, let me just start by saying that I am certainly shedding no tears, and I'm really glad to see the toppling of the really brutal Ayatollah and his regime. But the problem here is that the president has really gone in with a weakened hand by not coming to Congress. He should have asked for an authorization for use of military force. He has essentially been all over the map when it comes to what the actual day after plan is here. He's cut off the head of a serpent, and it's unclear who it is that's even running Iran right now that unconditional surrender would come from. It's a preposterous definition that Caroline Leavitt laid out. Unconditional surrender in war, which is what this clearly is when the defeated the defeated enemy.
Might have lost the Congresswoman there. I think we froze up, Congresswoman. If you can stay with us here, we have a lot of other questions, knowing that we've got a member of the House Appropriations Committee in Debbie Wasserman Schultz. There's still a partial government shutdown, Tyler, that's underway, and we're not talking about it. very often because paychecks haven't been missed yet, but that's changing this weekend.
Right. We're expecting the first missed paycheck to come this Friday for nearly 206,000 DHS employees. We have to remember this is one of the largest federal agencies in the United States government. But now we're seeing perhaps a new urgency put on by Republicans who are calling out that Iran retaliation could raise the risk of DHS not being fully funded, plus keeping in mind, of course, that ICE is actually pretty funded, right, under the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Exactly.
And that's
For
the
many
crux
more
of the
years.
issue. Democrats wanting to see changes when it comes to immigration and customs enforcement.
I think we've reconnected with the Congresswoman. This is an interesting moment here. We want to get to you on the funding issue in DHS, Congresswoman, but as we talk about this conflict that's underway in Iran, and I realize that you have some issues that you've already pointed out, do you worry as well about an increased threat when it comes to domestic terrorism?
It is deeply concerning because there was not a day after plan, because there was not the kind of preparation necessary. You have Iran that is now attacking our allies. We have a concerning act of potentially domestic terrorism that occurred in Austin, Texas. That is why Congress is supposed to be consulted and has the sole authority in the Constitution to declare war here. The president needs to make sure that he articulates what the actual plan is. And as a senior appropriator, Joe, I'll tell you that I'm really concerned that the depletion of our munitions, I've talked to the defense industry as well, and they are very concerned. I will support a supplemental because we have our military over there, and we need to make sure that we're protecting our national security interests and ensuring that they have the resources that they need. But the president needs to deal with the American people.
Have you heard from any of your other Democratic colleagues if they will also get on board with supplemental funding? There is reporting that there could be some things tacked on to a bill in order to get more in your party on board. Or do you think that this could be perhaps an easy vote for Democrats?
Well, those negotiations will take place as we move forward. We obviously have a lot of concerns when it comes to particularly DHS, as you mentioned. They need to rein in ICE and ensure that when they're engaged in enforcement actions, that they take the masks off, that they put identification on, that they are not barreling people's doors down and engaging in illegal searches and seizures, that they follow the Constitution. Pretty simple asks. We need to make sure that we can get that accomplished so we can reopen the Department of Homeland Security.
Does a new head of the department help? I know a lot of Democrats have said no to this question, that this doesn't help to unlock a funding deal for DHS simply because Kristi Noem has been removed. But if Mark Wayne Mullen, the senator from Oklahoma, is in fact confirmed, he's going to have to get some Democratic support there, right? Would he not be open to making some of those changes? Is that your hope? I
mean, I'm ever optimistic, but I'm not suspecting that's likely. He's been a total loyalist to Donald Trump. I mean, I had a good relationship with him when he served in Congress, but he's not demonstrated any independence, and I would expect he would just carry out and do Donald Trump's bidding. But it is good that Kristi Noem is gone. She wasn't qualified, and she repealed temporary protective status. She blew $600 million on a detention center in the middle of the Everglades, violating tribal sovereignty and the environment. She needed to go.
In the final minute we have you, Congresswoman, I'd love to get your reaction to this reporting that Russia is providing intelligence to Iran. What sort of response would you want to see from the administration when it comes to this, and just how big a risk could this mean for the battlefield?
Oh, you mean Donald Trump's best friend, Vladimir Putin, in Russia? I mean, this is what I mean when I say there are unintended consequences when a president engages in war without careful and thoughtful planning, consultation, and involvement with Congress, making a case to the American people, ensuring we're going to have the resources. And now this is expanding. Iran has attacked our allies in the region. We see, gas prices went up 50 cents a gallon in Florida. Diesel prices have gone up an average of 34 cents, and 80% of businesses with consumables use diesel fuel. This is beginning to spiral, and it's deeply concerning, and we need the president to level with the American people and communicate about what the plan is moving forward, and we need to wrap this up and ensure that we can keep our nation safe.
All right, a lot to watch. Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, thanks so much for joining us here on Bloomberg. And coming up, we'll keep our focus on the Middle East and what's next for the region with David Petraeus, former CIA director, up ahead. But first, a downside surprise in U.S. payrolls is casting doubt on the prospect of a steadying job market. We'll dive into the numbers with Betsey Stevenson, former chief economist for the Labor Department. That's up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tyler Kendall. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. A downward surprise in jobs combined with $90 a barrel crude oil made a nasty combination for markets today. As we turn to Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick for Power Moves live from World Headquarters in New York. Romaine?
Yeah, it just really adds to that wall of worry, that proverbial wall of worry that markets have been trying to climb. Concerns about AI, concerns about the private credit space, concerns about what's been going on with Iran, and now this morning concerns about whether the job market is indeed weakening. That contraction of more than 90,000 jobs in the most recent month. Some investors trying to dismiss it as somewhat transitory, if you will, temporary factors that led to that weakness. But there's been a trend line that a lot of people have pointed to that seem to suggest that there is something going on underneath the surface. That spooked investors, leading to the broadest weekly sell-off in the S&P 500 since at least October. You add on to that the inflationary pressures, which of course becomes an economic story. You were talking about it a little bit earlier, Joe. Crude oil right now in the U.S., WTI crude above $90 a barrel. A week ago, we were below $70 a barrel. 2 weeks ago, we were below $60 a barrel. It's a rate of change that is catching a lot of traders off guard, and it has real-world impact, Joe. If you go to the pump, AAA now saying this week alone, the price at the pump on average higher by about 12%.
Not welcome news for President Trump. Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick tracking it all for us. Romaine, thank you. And joining us now with her reaction to today's jobs numbers is Betsey Stevenson, professor of public policy and economics at the Ford School at the University of Michigan. She's also the former chief economist at the Labor Department under the Obama administration. Betsey, thanks for being here. As we mentioned, we got this downside surprise today when it came to the February payrolls report. We also heard from Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee earlier today, who pointed out and said that the sustained rise in unemployment on top of the oil price shock that we were just talking about with Romaine could create a, quote, stagflationary environment. How concerned are you about that risk?
Well, I think there's reason to be concerned, but let's turn straight, first of all, to the job market, and then why would we have that kind of concern? So one of the things that's been going on in the job market is we've been losing jobs in manufacturing and goods producing all year, since that tariff announcement in April. So the worldwide tariffs that President Trump announced did not help boost American manufacturing. In fact, we've seen more jobs lost. And one reason for that was the really just broad-brushed approach to putting tariffs on everything that's imported, which meant that U.S. manufacturers faced a higher cost of imported items that they use to manufacture things in the U.S. So the input prices going up, and then that all comes together to, cooling their expansion of manufacturing employment, as well as some policy choices, around environmental aspects that might have put some downward jobs pressure on our goods producing and manufacturing. So you put all that together, and that's been a real weakness. And then we have just across the board inflation staying higher, again, primarily because of the tariffs. And that is, chilling a little bit of what people are buying and putting a little bit of a chill, particularly the uncertainty that businesses face and how much businesses want to invest in expanding. So that gives us an economy that has really been driven a lot by the AI anticipation and boom, but underneath it, it's looked pretty weak this year. And I'll give you one stat that'll help you see how weak it is. If you subtract out private sector healthcare and education jobs this year, we have had negative job growth almost every single month since President Trump has come into office. Right? So out of the last 13 months, we've seen negative job growth 11 of those 13 months, once we subtract out that education and healthcare jobs. And those jobs ended up turning south themselves this month, revealing how much we were depending on them to get positive growth.
Wow. Well, you just had a lot for us there to unpack, Betsy. We see declines in leisure, hospitality, construction, healthcare, and social assistance, which had been propping up the job market, all lower here. And to your point, there was no job growth over the last year following the revisions that we saw. So wouldn't want to be the Fed right now. What does Jay Powell do? What do policymakers do who are also worried about prices rising?
You know, a few months ago in Jay Powell's statements, he said households are really struggling with higher prices, and so we need to focus on inflation. But equally, the best way for them to afford higher prices is to have a job. So we need to make sure that we're keeping the labor market strong. I think if you look at where the labor market's been, they have really been on the, they've been walking a tightrope. And with the revisions in this report telling us actually December and January was weaker than we realized, and then a negative number this month, I think it says they're starting to fall off the tightrope towards a weaker labor market. But that's occurring at a time where oil prices are rising. We've got an international conflict, and it's not clear that their tool, which is to try to stimulate demand, is going to get us more employment without jacking inflation even higher.
Well, to follow up on that, with retail gasoline now up, will this cause consumers to pull back in other goods and services, suppressing real spending growth down the line, something that we know that the Fed's closely tracking?
Well, I will say consumers get very upset about rising gas prices, and that's because you see it, right? You drive by, you see it on the corner, you stand at the pump, and there's not much else to do besides watch the numbers scroll up as you're filling your car, so you're well aware of it. But it is actually a small part of, even really lower income households' budgets, but the typical American, this is a small part of their budget. It is one that's really salient, to your point, so they pay a lot of attention to it, but to cover those increases is not going to require a notable amount of pulling back on other spending. But uncertainty about how the war might play out, how high oil prices might go, how unemployment might rise, those kinds of concerns, I think, are more important and could potentially lead to further consumer cutbacks that could reverberate through the economy. And I also want to emphasize that those higher fuel costs, they're not just about you getting gas at the pump. Companies use it, so getting goods across the country in trucks, running your factories, getting trains out with goods. So it will start to cause the price of many goods to go up, not just gas.
Betsy, it's great to have you. Happy Jobs Day. Betsey Stevenson, professor of public policy and economics at the University of Michigan. It's always good to spend some time. Coming up, President Trump is demanding, as we've reported, unconditional surrender from Iran. We're going to bring you an important conversation you will not want to miss. With concerns over a possible widening war, we will speak with retired Army General David Petraeus. It's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
But of course, as the president has maintained, we have more than enough ammunition, weapons, stockpiles to achieve the objectives of Operation Epic Fury and beyond. We've taken out nearly 30 of their ships. Their Navy has been deemed combat ineffective. 90% reduction in ballistic missile retaliatory strikes against the United States and our Gulf Arab and partners in the region. So, of course, we are achieving the military objectives of this operation.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, where we heard from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt earlier today, giving reporters there an update on the war with Iran. But the administration is facing many questions about strategy, stocks of munitions, and the endgame, of course, in this conflict. And we're joined by a voice of experience from inside the Pentagon, inside the CIA, and on the battlefield. Retired Army General David Petraeus served as CIA Director in the Obama administration, was commander of U.S. Central Command. General, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. It's good to see you.
Good to be back, Joe.
You
Thank
helped to drive the 101st Airborne on the march to Baghdad. You led U.S. forces in Afghanistan. And, of course, you know how quickly a situation like this can lead to an occupation and turn into a quagmire. Is it possible for the president to achieve his stated objectives purely from the air?
Well, it is, because he's clarified the stated objectives to not include our forces bringing about regime change, but to creating conditions for a possible political transition. And that is very achievable, as are the other goals. Actually, the White House spokeswoman was correct. I think we're doing very, very well in the military campaign. We obviously had enormous success against the regime leaders very early on. We've largely taken down their air and ballistic missile defenses, so we can fly non-stealthy aircraft, the B-1 and B-2, B-52 bombers, in addition to the B-2 bombers, the stealth aircraft. We are rapidly taking down the missile launchers, missile stockpiles, and even the manufacturing facilities for the missiles, making inroads on the drone threat as well, although that is persistent and challenging. It's what killed our 6 soldiers in Kuwait, after all. Dramatic progress against the Iranian Navy. The vast majority of that is on the bottom of the Gulf. And also any remnants of the nuclear program will be addressed as well during this campaign. I think we will create conditions in which the regime is dramatically weakened. Their command and control is significantly really, I think degraded was probably the right term. You could almost say destroyed. But there's still going to be a very large force of members, of guys with guns, who are going to remain loyal to the regime. And it could be as many as 1 million men under arms. They've shown a willingness to kill their own citizens when they demonstrate against them. Tens of thousands in January alone, and tens of thousands more detained. So the conditions may be there. The question is, will there be an uprising with real combat capability, real leadership, organization, or will it be modest ethnic and sectarian minorities in various parts of the country?
Well, when we are looking at what will happen next, you just outlined a lot of the tactical successes that we've already seen. We heard this week from U.S. officials that this conflict is about to enter into a second phase where we're going to start to see strikes deeper into Iran. From an operational perspective, can you give us some context here? How much more difficult this operation is about to get for U.S. and Israeli forces?
Well, it depends on whether we have completely taken down the air defenses in particular. We certainly have done that in the areas where we're already flying. That's why we have the confidence to fly the non-stealthy B-1 and B-52 bombers. These are the workhorses that we have out there, in addition to still flying the stealth fighter bombers and other assets, and using cruise missiles launched from sea or from air outside the theater. So as we go further into the interior of Iran, obviously the distances get greater. You're going to have to refuel perhaps a bit more before you enter the airspace. But it really comes down to whether we have completely taken out the air and ballistic missile defenses. And I think that we either will have by that time, or we will shortly after going into it. The truth is that the most sophisticated air and ballistic missile defense system that Iran had was taken out in the early hours of the 12-day air campaign by the Israelis flying F-35s that we provided to them. This is a Russian system, and Russia has none to spare at this point in time. They can't share, replace that system at all. They're barely able to keep their own systems functional. They're targeted every single day by Ukrainians with drones. So I think this will be, again, longer distance, newer targets, obviously, but very, very doable, and also very necessary.
General, this is a conflict that is now involving 12 countries, and there's reporting today by the Washington Post that Russia is now providing targeting information to Iran to help attack Americans. How worried are you about this widening into a larger regional or global conflict?
Well, it's obviously concerning, that although it has really backfired on Iran. They, I think, thought that they could conduct horizontal escalation. In other words, not just hit American targets and Israeli targets, but go after the host nation countries and the rest of this, and hitting civilian, a hotel, for example, a seaport, an airport, French naval base, and a variety of other, a number of energy facilities also in the region, thinking that that would bring pressure from those countries on the U.S. to wrap it up. That has not happened. In fact, if anything, those countries are now against Iran instead of taking a knee. And we may see some of them do more than just integrate their air and ballistic missile defenses with those of the U.S. and also of Israel. The Russian provision of intelligence is, in a way, predictable, but very concerning. Without this, they would not have the precision that they apparently do have to conduct missile and drone strikes, noting that, yes, the missile program has been dramatically degraded. As I mentioned earlier, the launchers, the stockpiles, and even now the manufacturing facilities are being taken down systematically. But the drones, again, still a problem as well. And of course, there's a little bit of something called missile math here now, and that gets a bit concerning as you go on. We're constantly calculating how many interceptors do we have left for our Patriot system, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, the THAAD system, and then also the SM-3. These are the Patriot-like system, if you will, on our destroyers, and together with those of our, again, partners and allies in the region. That's all integrated in a seamless system. Everyone has the same air picture and the rest of this. But keep in mind, we produced maybe 620 or so Patriots last year. That was a dramatic increase over previous years because we were providing them to Ukraine, building up in the Indo-Pacific, used a number of them during the 12-day air campaign last summer. And you can do the math. We know essentially how many missiles have been coming. There's pretty granular detail. And there is a point at which you start to get a bit worried about how many missiles do they have left and how many interceptors do we have left, especially if you're shooting two to get one. Oftentimes, if you're comfortable with the missile math, you'll shoot two interceptors to take down one missile. I'm not sure whether that is going to continue to be possible given the numbers on each side. So that's something that has to be kept in mind. Look, the reason the president called the heads of these different defense industrial corporations together today is to exhort them to dramatically increase production of the Patriots, THAAD, SM-3 specifically, but then a number of other aspects as well. Keep in mind that Ukraine this year, I was just there about 4 or 5 weeks ago, the manufacturers of the drones there say that collectively they will make 7 million drones this year. They're already throwing 10,000 a day at the Russians in various forms, suicide drones, surveillance, bomber drones, etc. We produced probably 400,000 until we really ramp that up. And by the way, the Ukrainians produce them at a much lower cost and generally are more effective because they're changing the software every week or two and the hardware every several weeks. But this effort to rebuild our military industrial complex is imperative in the United States if we're to be ready for the wars of the future.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, General. In the final minute we have you, we do a lot of reporting here at Bloomberg about revitalizing the defense industrial base. To meet the goals that you just outlined, what sort of timeline are we looking at? Is there enough resources to push this along fast enough to give the U.S. that advantage to bolster our weapon stockpiles?
Well, we're going to have to dramatically increase our industrial capacity. That effort really has been going on. To be fair, it was started under the previous administration where there was a recognition that the consumption rates for our Ukrainian partners are vastly greater for heavy artillery, for a number of the other munitions that we were provided, and so forth. And so that was the early catalyst to expand this. And now I'm delighted to see, pleased to see that the president is calling them together and really encouraging that we get on with it. By the way, we also have to transform our forces. We need to change our very concepts of war to recognize what is going on in Ukraine, where you're essentially seeing unmanned systems, not just in the air, but also at sea and on the ground, doing combat with each other. Yes, there are humans on that battlefield still, but tanks cannot survive anymore, nor can infantry fighting vehicles. It's 3 Russians running across the street with a drone providing air cover. We have to change our very doctrine, and then we have to dramatically change what it is that we're buying and also how we buy it. It needs to be updated constantly, not, say, 1 million of exactly this over the next 4 years.
All right, retired General David Petraeus, former CIA Director and former Commander of U.S. Central Command. General, thank you for joining us here on Bloomberg. And joining us now with his reaction to our conversation with General Petraeus is retired Colonel Wayne Sanders. He's Senior Defense Research Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Wayne, it is good to see you. The General just said that he's, quote, pleased to see these defense companies at the White House today. We're talking about Lockheed Martin, Boeing, RTX. What is your takeaway from that meeting and just how quickly we could see a boost in our weapon stockpiles with the president's pressure now on these companies?
Thanks so much, Tyler. I think that when you look at this right now, it could not have gone better in terms of quadrupling munition production by these companies. The big winners are going to be your Lockheed, RTX, Northrop, and Boeing. I think those are the big 4. RTX has multiple programs, both inside of the long-range exquisite programs that you heard General Petraeus talk about. So does Lockheed as well as some of the short-range munitions. So they've got some overlap that's going to be tied to that. L3 Harris plays a key role in this as well in terms of their missile solution side of the house. So really what the question is, and I think what you're going to see is you're also going to see some more firm fixed price contracts, but some off-ramps that allow them to be able to provide some what they call IDIQ, right? The indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, so that they can ramp up appropriately as they go through. That would allow them to be able to put maybe a third line in, a third shift, if you will. That's going to come with overtime for the workers, and the workforce piece is going to be a part of it. I guarantee you that was part of that discussion.
Hey, Colonel, the General talked about missile math. David Petraeus, he referred to that several times. Until we get this next batch of munitions or start to resupply our forces in the Gulf, are these game day calls? Are they making calls in the moment based on the missile math to decide, for instance, like he said, how many interceptors to send in the air or how to deal with an imminent threat?
I think the missile math is very important, but I don't think it's tied directly to an imminent danger threat of running out of munitions. What I think they're looking at is, can I do something with a much cheaper munition now that we have air superiority, right? So when you look at the difference between a $2.5 million JASSM missile versus a $25,000 JDAM gravity bomb, you're talking about something that's 100 times cheaper and something that we have hundreds of thousands that have been produced that sit in our arsenal at this time, right? So let's move it out of the missile range piece and put it into something that can still be just as effective. We've taken out their air defense, as General Petraeus talked about. They don't have an electronic warfare capability that would jam anything that a gravity bomb would actually hit. So you're still going to see very, very precise attacks using these other munitions. And it shows us that we're trying to save everything we can. So part of that missile math is going to be, do I need to use it now because it's the only munition that can actually achieve the effect that I'm looking for? Or should I save that for a potential contingency in 2027 and beyond?
He's the best at this. Retired Colonel Wayne Sanders. Thank you, Colonel. Senior Defense Research Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, with us live on Balance of Power. Coming up, thousands gathering today to pay respects to the late civil rights activist, Reverend Jesse Jackson. We'll bring you details coming up on Balance of Power, only on Bloomberg TV and radio. It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I'm Joe Matthew in Washington with our eyes on the White House after another doozy of a week. as we assemble this evening's political panel for their take on everything that's happened since the initial strikes against Iran last weekend. Bloomberg Politics contributor and Democratic analyst Jeannie Sheehan Zaino, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center, joined today by Republican strategist Lester Munson, principal of the international practice at BGR Group. It's great to see you both. Lester, you could argue that the walls are closing in right now at the White House. I know that the administration is projecting a very optimistic view and tone about what's happening in Iraq, but the fact is the president now has $90 a barrel oil to deal with, gasoline prices moving closer to $3.50. And we've got a situation in Iran that's raising a lot of questions about strategy and endgame. His second year is shaping up to be a real political challenge on the very same issues that brought him to the White House.
I think, Joe, there's no doubt that the decision to go to war with Iran is a huge gamble, probably the biggest one of President Trump's administration, of his first or his second administration. If this goes well, he's going to be remembered for a long time as the person who changed the Middle East forever. And if it doesn't go well, it's going to be tough news at the ballot box, I suspect. Yeah. I think that's why he's throwing the marker out there for a 4 to 5 week campaign. He needs that much time for the U.S. military and allied forces to take out those targets that General Petraeus was talking about earlier, the nuclear sites, the missile sites, some of these weapons manufacturing areas, to get that done, and also to secure the Strait of Hormuz. So there's a lot of work to do here, and I think he likes keeping folks a little bit guessing as to what his ultimate outcome is going to be, but I think he has a pretty good idea in his own head what he's looking for.
Well, to Joe's point about now WTI hitting above $90 a barrel, we're also starting to see retail gas prices go up. We heard from the NEC director, Kevin Hassett, earlier today speaking on Bloomberg Television and radio. And Jeannie, we'll play this bite for you. He says that the administration has a lot of tools in their toolkit to bring down energy prices.
We had the crazy weather in February. The worst of it was actually outside of the survey week, but there was a lot of lingering junk, as you might recall, with the ice that was everywhere. We had some strikes on the West Coast that knocked off between 30 and 40,000 jobs. And so I think that on net, it's almost like a wash number.
Well, that was the NEC director there about today's downside surprise when it comes to jobs, another headwind facing this administration. But the NEC director, Jeannie, also said that there are a lot of different things that the administration could do. Sanctions waivers, for one example, that's already been done. He didn't say that they're at the point yet where they're thinking about tapping the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But, Jeannie, I'm curious if you think that we're going to start to hear a little bit more telegraphing from officials as gas prices climb higher.
We absolutely should. And I'm glad you played that clip, Tyler, because obviously the increasing price of oil and the loss of jobs today, those are two of the most important headwinds that the president and the party are going to face as they go into November. And, you know, I think what I'm hearing is a lot of sort of fanciful thinking at this point. If we step back and just look at what is causing the price of oil to go up the way it has dramatically in the last few days, it is, of course, the war in Iran that we started with Israel. And the president has no way in which to show us how this thing is winnable, because winning means toppling and replacing this regime with a more friendly, U.S.-friendly, Israel-friendly regime. And the president has tried several ways. He's tried to put an armada there. They didn't capitulate. He's tried to decapitate. We decapitated. They didn't capitulate. Now we're bombing the heck out of them. No capitulation signs yet. The next step is what we're hearing, which is minimal boots on the ground and try to encourage the Kurds and the Azerbaijanis to try to overthrow this government. Not only are we bombing the Kurdish area of Iran, but there is no sign that they are in a place to topple this regime. Nobody who supports this war can give a story about how this thing gets us to a win. And so the price of oil will go up unless we step back or the president steps back, or he's got something under his sleeve that nobody who knows about Iran can tell us.
Lester, when lawmakers return to Washington, the White House is going to be asking for more money for this war effort. We saw a statement today from the president of the Taxpayers for Common Sense, Steve Ellis, who said Congress voted to hand the president unchecked war powers. Now it's being asked to hand him a blank check to pay for it. Knowing that we have the first $1 trillion defense budget in American history, And he talks about the 18% funding boost this year that Congress just approved. Why should there be a need for more money?
Joe, I know this sounds crazy. $1 trillion defense budget is actually low. You go by historical standards, defense budget as a percentage of GDP, we're at a relatively low level. It should be higher. The U.S. is playing a leading role in the world, providing defense for Europe and the Middle East and dealing with a rising China. We have real security needs in the world. We actually do need a vigorous defense budget. I rarely disagree with Jeannie on stuff. Yeah. I actually think the president's been pretty good on Iran so far, and he is in his very unique way clearly defined. We're looking to eliminate these targets. General Petraeus talked about them. It looks like we're making a pretty good run at doing exactly those things relatively quickly. This is not going to be like Iraq or Afghanistan with a years-long U.S. occupation of Iran. So it's a very different thing that's happening.
Well, Jeannie, to build off of what Lester is outlining here, we actually heard from Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a Democrat from Florida, earlier this hour, making some news on this program, saying that she would vote in favor of an emergency supplemental for the Pentagon. So is this really going to be a politically fraught vote for Democrats? What do they have to weigh as we head into the midterms? And we've heard some outcry from the base.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fraught vote all around because, of course, we're talking about an enormous defense budget already, as Lester just said. And so they're going to have to make a decision as to whether, in fact, as we go into this campaign where affordability is going to be the issue on the table, if more money should be going into defense. And, you know, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she knows that this is something that her constituents want, so she'll do it. Others aren't going to feel the same.
Jeannie Shanzano and Lester Munson with great analysis. Thank you both for a great conversation. Today, the three living Democratic presidents, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Bill Clinton, plus former Vice President Kamala Harris, joined thousands of attendees at the funeral service honoring the late civil rights activist, Reverend Jesse Jackson. They all helped to celebrate Jackson's legacy, including a rare public moment for Joe Biden. Listen.
The more we know one another, the more we understand what we're going through. There's enough decency and human nature in this country to reach out, to help. You know, Jesse kept hope alive for us in his lifetime. And we've got to continue to do it in our lifetime for our children. Because there's nothing beyond our capacity when we work together. Nothing, nothing, nothing. So stand up and finish this job.
Former President Joe Biden from earlier today in Chicago. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Tyler Kendall in Washington. We'll see you back here on Monday on Balance of Power, only on Bloomberg TV and radio.